Hey, what's up guys? Ty Dinelli from riskengineeringmusic.com in for another episode today. And what are we talking about? We're talking about a process that I've been using in my mixing and mastering process for quite some time now. And I wanted to share this with you. It's called top-down mixing. Let's get into it. So first and foremost, if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, hit that subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. Give me a like, shoot a comment, anything. I'd appreciate it. Now, let's get into today's topic, and that is top-down mixing. Now, top-down mixing is a process where you kind of start from the top down, hence the name. Your typical standard way of mixing is you're kind of going in and you're individually mixing different elements within the track. You're starting with maybe, there's no right or wrong here, but maybe you start with your drums. You get your kick, you get your snare good, then you move on to your hi-hats, percussive instruments, anything like that. And then you might move on to your bass and then other instruments within the beat, and then you'll get to your vocals and so forth, so forth. But with top-down mixing, before you get into any individual stem mixing, you're actually going from your kind of mix bus or your master. I do everything on my mix bus, which is then sent to the master. But regardless, you're doing things right from the start and then moving your way down. So what could that imply? Well, you could have several different things on it. And if you're like me, I do hybrid mixing. So I'm in the box and I'm also using some of this gear that I have right beside me. I know you can't see it in the frame, but if you follow me on Instagram and everything else, I'm sure you've seen it. But I like to incorporate both the digital and the analog ways of mixing. Now, on my mix bus, when I'm doing the top down, well, I'm pretty much always doing the top down technique, but my thing starts like this. I've got the Brainworks V3 plugin. So that's kind of a mastering EQ. It's got a bunch of different things, but I love that plugin because it's so versatile. A lot of times small movements go a long way. You can make things mono, like anything in below any frequency, you can make mono to kind of clean up the sides of your mix. Because a lot of times in a mix, the muddiness is in that kind of low end on the sides. So you can make things mono to kind of put things right in the middle in that lower range. You can also isolate different frequencies within the plugin. It's really cool. It's got like a solo mode. So if you're on this, and you hit a button, it's hard to explain right now, but if you hit a button and you can sweep for frequencies, almost like you can with the FabFilter Pro Q3, for instance. But it does it in a really cool way. You can also add width to your mix with this plugin. And there's other things, but just go check it out if you guys haven't seen it or heard about it. I have the plugin Alliance version of it. I believe Universal Audio makes a version of it too. I'll double check that though. But anyways, I like to start with that a lot of the time. This is processing everything in the track, right? So keep that in mind. We're not going to individual instruments or voices yet. Next up, I like to do, I'll insert an EQ, but I don't usually touch this until I've finished my mix, because this is just for final, any little kind of tweaks with the overall song. This is what I'm doing with this EQ. So I don't really touch it in this phase. I just put it there because I know I'm going to use it. After that, I'll usually get to a compressor, whether I'm using something in the box or this is the time where I usually start to go to my outboard here. I've got the Stam Audio bus compressor, which I love. It's very versatile. It's got a bunch of things added to it that the original SSL doesn't have, which is what I love about it. You have the E series knob and the G series knob as well. It also has a transformer put into it as a modification that gives it almost the British Neve kind of sound to it. So you can add a lot of warmth if you hit that button. From there, I've also got the Audioscape bus comp as well that sometimes I'll use, and there's no, it's not always this bus compressor or always this bus compressor. Sometimes I'll use one on my drums and then one is on my mix bus. Sometimes I'll just use one. I won't put it on my drums at all, but it's there if I want it. After that, I'm going to saturation. Now this could also be in the box, or it could be with my SSL Fusion. You've got the typical vintage drive, which can be really nice and add a really cool color to the track, give it a lot of warmth, and you can also EQ it. You've got your high pass frequency section on it, which you can kind of use to tame your high end. You've got the transformer button that you can insert on it as well, and it's also got a width kind of depth part on it as well. So you can do some really cool things with this piece of gear. I love it. I use it a lot on my mix bus, so check it out. You can also use plugins if you don't have the hardware. SSL makes the SSL Fusion plugins that kind of emulate what the gear does, obviously. There's also things, if I'm just staying in the box with saturation, that I'll use, such as the Oxford inflator. I'll use the black box sometimes by Plugin Alliance. Sometimes I'll go for like a tape emulation as well, whether that's one of the UAD tape emulators, or sometimes I'll use the Slate Digital tape emulation. I really like the sound of that. It gives a lot of low-end warmth. So those are some things that I'll use in this particular instance. After that, I might do one or two kind of things of saturation. Really depends on what I think the song needs, but use as you please. After that, I'm usually going with some kind of a limiter. Now, this can change. I don't know, I use different limiters depending on the song, depending on what I'm trying to achieve. A lot of times the main three that I'll use are the Oxford limiter by Universal Audio. I've also got the Fab Filter limiter, which I really like. I find it super transparent, super clean. It just gives you a great sound and it's easy to use. After that, sometimes, I don't know why, I really like that Slate Digital limiter sometimes. I find it to be really clean and transparent as well. I'm drawing a blank on the name of it right now. It's like I don't know, FX or F something. I'll plug it in later, but some of those limiters are my favorites to use, where I get my LUFS levels up to where I want them. In this process, I'm usually aiming for somewhere between 8 and 10 LUFS. This is all dependent on what I want to do with the song, but most times I'm kind of aiming for that range. And more times I'm going for around the -10 range, and then once I'm done my actual mix, I might boost it up to like that -8, because that seems to be the sweet spot that everyone's going for these days. Some people want it more, some people want it less, but -8 is usually where we're aiming for in this time of music. So those are kind of my steps of top-down mixing. After that, you'll kind of have an already decent sounding song to begin with. And then from there, you can go on to your individual track mixing and editing. The nice thing about doing this is when you go into your individual stem mixing, you now kind of have the limiter on, so you know what it's gonna sound like when it's loud. A lot of the times when you're mixing, sometimes you'll mix and then you'll throw your limiter on and you'll be like, oh God, my high end is so harsh and just brittle now. So then you have to go back in and do some mixing. Whereas when you do it like this, you're mixing into the limiter already. So you already kind of know what it's sounding like going into it. Now, you gotta be careful at the same time, because you don't wanna be pushing all your stuff up too high where your limiter gets slammed while you're mixing individual tracks. So be careful and go back, check your limiter, or if you have something on it that shows you your LUFS level, check it so you make sure you're not going crazy or you're not going under. You want to keep checking that so that you can see it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. Same with your compressor, make sure it's not going crazy. I like to just kind of touch it a little bit. I don't go overboard with my bus compressing or in the box compressing on the mix bus. So just watch those things. Once you're done your mix, adjust things, you know, if you have to on the mix bus, but this will give you a really good sound and it'll just give you the loudness going into the mix so that you know what to expect with your limiters already on. So give it a try, guys. This is something that I do 95% of the time when I'm mixing. So if you guys have any questions, hit the comments, and till next time, guys, take care.